You love to see it, you know you do. We all love tier lists and absolutely destroying the person that was making them for having their own opinions. So I thought, hey, why the hell not? I quickly gathered all 0 of my friends to help me pick and choose between all the Sonic games that have ever been made. I think I got most of them. And it was a headache. There are an awful lot of places I could begin with this lot, all being very controversial. The many different types of games that there are here, all with different aesthetics, sounds and mechanics, it surprised me that they're all in the same game series. And then there's the many aspects you can make this list from. Do we mainly account for plot, gameplay, setting? I don't know. I'll probably just learn as I go along, because that always works out perfectly fine. First line of business though, we'll need to lay down some ground rules. Rule 1, I am not going to be including games where Sonic is considered a third party, so Smash Bros, Puyo Puyo Tetris, Fall Guys, they're not going to be included here, sorry to disappoint you. This is really just to keep the clutter out and stop this list from being the size of Europe. Rule 2, most handheld games and or ports won't be included here either. The games on the App Store are all very similar and aren't really games, if you know what I mean. And the line of DS ports won't be included here either. Except, of course, Rule 3. I will not be ranking these games solely based on shit like plot or gameplay alone. These are general placements on how they work as games in general in the Sonic franchise. There may be a little bit of bias present, but trust me when I say that I will cement it as best I can. Okay? Rule 4. I most likely won't be able to cover every single game ever released because that's an awful lot to cover, and games like Mean Bean Machine and Sonic Tennis, I really don't think they need to be on this list, so I'll pick and choose which of these extra spin-off games to include, just to keep me from losing track or going mentally insane. Or both. And if I cover a certain series with lots of titles in it, I'll batch that entire series into one slot as opposed to 4 or 5 individual slots, just to save time. And lastly, Rule 5. Don't take this as fact, okay? This is purely opinionated and should not be treated as gospel. Just want to avoid pissing people off. Wait, what am I saying? I'm a Sonic tuber, of course I'm gonna piss people off. Also, I know that there's a new game looming above us right now, so why don't I wait until then to add onto this tier list? Because when that game gets released, it's going to be dissected to hell and back, and I'd rather get this out there now rather than later. Also, I just feel like we all need to take a quick break from all the absolute overload of information that we've gotten in the past months and return to something more quote-unquote normal to calm ourselves down. That and I honestly can't be asked. So, here we are, the rankings of games from S to E. I'm sure you all know the drill by now. S is the best, E is the worst. These are general tiers that I'll explain as we go along, and Sonic 4 Episode 1 is first. Yeah, no cap, we're going in now, boys. This is your hailing champion of trash. Sonic 4 as a whole is just generally a bad experience. Even Episode 2 isn't as up to par as the classic games, and I don't think anyone's taking away points for that. Bad lighting, ugly textures, annoying music, exploitable features, zero fun. The jackpot of a bad experience has been hit, and it has been hit hard. Along with this, the game made the sin of calling itself Sonic 4. You can't just slap that title onto a game that cannot even remotely live up to the classics. That's just guaranteed for disappointment from literally anyone that likes video games. And also, you got your stiff controls and gameplay that is less fun than an 11-year-old NES game. If you're looking for the biggest disappointment and the least enjoyable game in the series, look no further than here. And I don't think anyone's going to be offended by that statement. Right down to the bottom you go. So, now that we've established the lowest of the low, what comes next? Sonic Drift really isn't too special from what I've researched, and I guess like a rope in Drift 2, pretty much classic Mario Kart style gameplay with minor changes and 8-bit music piercing your ears throughout your playthrough. And then Triple Trouble is another oddball, very similar to previous classic games with very few differences, but worse appearance and copy-paste design, really just not as up to par as you'd like to see. And that's pretty much E tier. Games that are really not what you should be looking for, or just incredibly lackluster experiences that pale in comparison to those higher up this divisive board. Speaking of which, D tier. This place is sort of reserved for games that are not necessarily downright utter garbage, but really still not fantastic games that I'd probably skip the opportunity to play. But you also got to understand that as we move up this list, we begin getting into realms of games that I do still enjoy. It's just that in comparison to other games with other strengths and weaknesses, I will prefer some over others, so yeah. And 3D Blast, I think, fits in just about here. While I do appreciate this more unique take at a 3D gaming experience, it hasn't really aged well. It was certainly very impressive on release, it would be the starting point for all future 3D games going forward, and the music is pretty good, as always. as always, but the proportions can get a little bit confusing at times, and the item boxes were way too thin. Like, look at this, did they get ripped at the gym or something in between Chaotix and Adventure? It's nostalgic as fuck, but time has not been kind to 3D Blast, especially considering that 2 years later, Adventure was released, and I don't need to tell you that that was a much better experience than this. I think D is fair. Oh god, I need to barricade my windows. Following up, we got Sonic 4 Episode 2. While this second installment was undeniably better than its predecessor, that doesn't excuse it from still carrying over some of the same crucial problems. Controlling Sonic and Tails is still stiff and exploitable, and I noticed some textures have been reused. The same ugly, disgusting, nightmare-fueled textures from the first game. But Episode 2 does make the pair less prone to causing epilepsy, the zones are more unique, I really do dig White Park's aesthetic, and co-op was changed a little bit. And then of course you got the team-up gimmick letting you fly with Tails or roll into a ball and demolish everything at the speed of light. But it's still not enough to save this game from the repetitive boss fights, very little number of levels, and the... Now we move into the next big game that I considered adding to this tier, Rise of Lyric. Rise of Lyric and the whole Boom series has sort of synonymously become known as the biggest failure of the Sonic franchise so far. This attempted reboot tried to rebrand the whole cast into more marketable designs, I guess, with it being slandered for its off-putting look. You made a cast of characters that was slowly getting lankier every decade into a 6'7" Giga Bowser looking head-ass. Personally, the art style has slowly grown on me, and it makes more sense to have it since this reboot attempted to pander more to the cartoonish hijinks side of the brand, a task that Mania would later take on with more success. Mania, we'll get to that in a bit, but along with this, the characters were more expressive, we had hub worlds, they clearly tried. But you know why it's down here. Very poorly made game strewn with bugs, exploits and glitches, ridiculously stupid gameplay, and is one of the few Sonic games where you rarely ever go fast. It's because of this and the very poor initial reception that Rise of Lyric sinks down here to D. My condolences to Big Red Button, God rest your souls after 2014. Another infamous title in the fandom is Secret Rings. Set in the 1001 Arabian Nights, Secret Rings I don't have too fond memories of. Starting with controls, which are straight up overdosing on fucking meth. You hold the Wiimote sideways and tilt it forwards and backwards to move only in the Z direction. It's so unbelievably awkward that I'm surprised this got past QA testing. And then there are the levels. The first level was great aesthetically, but the rest feels so bizarre and misplaced. Even though they're parts of the other 1001 stories, it's just really not a fantastic game. So why'd I put it at D and not E? Well, I can appreciate what Sega were trying to do. Because of the crash and burn that was a certain other game we'll get into later, Sega tried rebranding. Again, with this as one of the results. The atmosphere surrounding this game is pretty spot on, and the first areas feel quite unique and like they are in a Middle Eastern setting, and once you eventually get the hang of it, you feel like an absolute god breezing through these levels. But, you know, I just don't want to get chronic arthritis while doing it. And because of this, it's in D. I was this close to putting it in E tier, okay? Only just. Okay, now finishing off with a quickfire round, Blast, Chaotix, and Chaos would all slot into this group as well. These are three games that are just sort of a thing, and not much else really. Chaotix you could maybe argue should be higher since it introduced us to Vector and Charmy and Espio, but that game, it felt like a goddamn fever dream, okay, so sue me. And then, Shadow the Hedgehog. I mean, he's got a P250, he's got a motorbike, a reputation for being the beginning of the end for the series' quality. Why not slap him in here as well? Thus, we move on to C, marking the sort of middle ground between the underwhelming and the good. Here you'll see games that are much more divisive as they may appeal to certain audiences more than others, and some are quite subjected to be higher or lower, but in general, these are okay games that are the most basic experience you could really ask for. Or alternatively, these are games with nothing much wrong with them in terms of functionality, but deviate quite a bit from your regular experience in a Sonic game. So, before moving on to the big titles, the Advanced series, Sonic R, Shattered Crystal, Fire and Ice, Rush Adventure, Heroes, Battle, Chronicles Dark Brotherhood, Rivals 1 and 2, and the Riders series, all of these are generally pretty decent enough games that work on a basic level both conceptually and gameplay wise, mainly adding spins onto pre-existing formulas in a way that works, but not much more than that. We also have the two Sega All-Stars racing games, both of which are pretty similar, only differences are the planes, boats and extra races, including TF2 for some unbeknownst reason.
Oh, heavy does not feel right.
As individual games, they're serviceable and kind of your average kart races, but they're fun. Hey, sorry to barge in on your comment writing, but originally I had TSR in B tier and these other two in C, but in hindsight, that's not very logical. TSR at best has an interesting gimmick that I do like and makes the game stand out from the latter, a shallow but enjoyable campaign and a fantastic OST, but from the lack of unique courses to the cars feeling pretty sluggish and slow at times, it's not quite good enough to be the best kart racer in the series. And All Stars Racing Transformed is also much better than I gave it credit for, with much faster gameplay, wider map variety, a lot more characters, a decently long campaign and a great soundtrack to boot. So this will actually go in B tier along with TSR, but TSR is the bare minimum for B. These are both pretty enjoyable races, with Transformed being the better title, but TSR gets a lot of hate I feel like simply just for being made after 2017, and being someone who has played a fair share of racing games in the past, both are good in their own ways, so I'll leave it at that. You may continue disagreeing with me now. And now, let's discuss this. The Storybook Saga was really fucking weird. A tricky one to put on this list. Secret Rings was easy, but with Black Knight, people typically fall into one of two categories. They either love it or they hate it. There's no real middle ground to be found, so I'm going to be going in based on my opinions here. So we talked about Secret Rings earlier, but what about its younger brother Black Knight? Black Knight is quite similar to Secret Rings. It takes place in another legendary setting, the realm of King Arthur.
£19 in video game currency.
But instead, Sonic is wielding a fucking claymore. There is so much fanfiction that has arisen from this one game. You don't have the same controls as Secret Rings this time, and you generally control better. It's certainly an upgrade, and the aesthetic is still thick as shit, along with infinitely more cohesive levels that logically correlate with the medieval setting. But here's why I placed it in C. As great as you can argue these games are, as much as you can love them, these games do not represent the slightest what the Sonic experience is actually like. Sonic's about going fast, collecting rings, stopping the bad guy, or God, depending on which day of the week he's working, and immersing yourself into this world, perhaps with some environmental storytelling. Not wielding Excalibur, slaying dragons, meeting mythical beings, and feeling like a rip-off Triforce. For me, this title goes a bit off the rails with this completely different genre and takes the essence of Sonic somewhat away, trading it in for a mythical RPG. This is more sort of personal preference, so I'm probably a minority in saying all this. You still have speed, sure, but oh, fuck it, I don't care. I think C is just a bit generous for this second and final installation in the Storybook Saga. Sorry DeviantArt, that's just what I think. Also, Sonic community, why has this not become a meme template already? There is so much potential here, and I will be expecting Reddit posts tomorrow. Storybook Saga is behind us. Now next up is... Never in my life have I seen such a divisive 2D game. CD is such a conflicting game to talk about. Some people love it, some people hate it, and I've seen firsthand people fight for and against it. It's one of those games where you either lean on the artistic visionary side or the traditional gameplay side. And me? I'm not too fond of this game. Artistically speaking, CD is pretty great. You've got a lot of zones with this distinctive 90s feel to it, and the themes of past, present and future are easy to spot and are refreshing. The artistic direction CD was going for resulted in an atmospherically rich game with a funky 90s aesthetic that feels fantastic. But just because something looks pretty and has passed the vibe check, does not mean that it's all well and good on the inside, specifically the gameplay. And that's a fact that GTA Online could sure use right now. The level design in CD, it's a total fucking mess. Springs everywhere, spikes at every corner, infuriating level design that is bound to confuse people and get them lost. They tried implementing exploration, but maybe try and get a grasp on not confusing people with the levels first, okay? And if you want to complete this game 100%, yeah, good luck with that. You gotta destroy every capsule, every Metal Sonic charging station, thing, whatever the fuck, and get every emerald to see the true ending. And good luck going back in time reliably. You get hardly enough room to run up to speed for long enough aside from purposefully designed areas for you to go into. They had to add parts to levels just so you could go back. If that isn't obvious enough, then I don't know what is. At the very least, the controls are still coherent and well, that's about it. Because I don't really want to talk about CD again, and because it's the safest play I could make to not get called out on twitter.com, I'm putting CD here, and it ain't budging. It's just saved by the atmosphere and controls that makes it more enjoyable. Still, could be better. Sonic Forces. I think I've said enough already, but let me just recap for you. My overall thoughts on Forces are that it's got pretty good graphics, beautiful environments, and good voice acting with natural sounding dialogue. But then we get into the negatives and whew, there are no shortage. The gameplay feels as if it's holding your hand through all the modern levels. I mean, you just hold down boost and win in ridiculously linear levels with no depth whatsoever, with rare occasions where you can move freely. Classic gameplay is very stiff and is one of the worst of 2D experiences in the series, and then the main problem, the plot. Holy shit. The story is at a constant battle with itself and whether or not it wants to be serious or lighthearted, and this wouldn't be as big of a problem if the whole game didn't revolve itself around this broken and nonsensical mess. I feel like I've covered Forces way too many times for my own well-being, so I won't pop off again, but Forces is superbly weak from a narrative point of view. But since the game has got some good in it, from the world, the okay soundtrack, and it's only just bearable gameplay, C is a generous place to slot it. That is not going to be its home by the end of this video. And last, but certainly not least, Sonic 06. Sonic the Hedgehog 2006. This is going to be wild. This is probably the most infamous Sonic game of all time for all the wrong reasons. Hell, probably even the most infamous piece of Sonic media of all time. 06 was the peak of the Dark Ages and has been ridiculed, mocked, criticized, bashed, and bullied by fans and non-fans even to this day. So I'm not going to waste my time by stating the obvious. It's unanimously hated by most. So why is it in C? Because it is so easy to dug around in. 06 tries to take itself super seriously. It wanted to give Silver a proper introduction to the series, give Shadow more lore, and promote bestiality with the poster boy, but because of the laughable CGI mocap, hysterical glitches big and small, the plot that was trying to do something unique but got blasted by dialogue and convoluted direction, you can't help but ironically love the absolute stupidity, as well as a dosage of pain. Unless you take Sonic games as seriously as a matter of national security, life or death, you will inevitably end up laughing at one of the weak points in the title, even more so if you're playing around friends. And to be honest, the story tried something at least. Granted, it missed pretty hard, but there was an attempt and has more character growth than the entirety of Forces. It's an unmatched experience of sheer nonsense, hence being the closing point for the C tier. But just a closing note for 06 again. Can we all just stop? Can everyone just stop? To this day, this game is used as a reason to hate this series as if it's to say it's been the same since. Can we all just fucking stop talking about this 15-year-old dumpster fire for the sake of shunning the series? Thank you. So here it is in all its glory. As you can see, we have a stark range of games with many different genres and many different pissed off sub-communities for their ranking, thus marking the halfway point for this glorious list. So from here on out, all the games featured will be those that I consider at the very least good. And I have a feeling I'm about to speedrun becoming the bane of the Sonic fanbase. The Mario and Sonic Olympic Games series. This is a really odd spin-off series that is surprisingly pretty good. The peak was probably 2010, 2012, and maybe 2014, as they capitalised most on the dream events taking place in both franchises' homeworlds or having actual story modes, some of which have hub worlds. The more modern games do have story modes as well, but the series has moved further away from focusing on dream events, which were arguably the biggest selling points and the highlight. But other than that, the events are actually pretty damn fun and can act as party games, perhaps on the same level as Mario Party and Jackbox series, minus the broken friendships and blatant racism. But above all else, they did what reality couldn't and gave us Tokyo 2020. This bizarre series gets my well-earned B, with older games nearer the top and newer titles sliding further down here. Sliding into B as well, we got Rush and Pocket Adventure. Rush has satisfying platforming throughout its runtime and is a generally pretty solid DS game, and Pocket Adventure managed to keep the essence of the classic trilogy game on an ancient piece of hardware, while still looking colourful and bright. Some quality 2D gameplay is to be had here. And now continuing on with 2D games, the original 1991 game Sonic the Hedgehog. Listen, the game is great, but it was more of a suggestion of what the series could be rather than what it will be. The original Genesis game was of course a major landmark title, not just for the series but the game industry as a whole. It's legendary, yet it still is more of a suggestion. Green Hill is of course fantastic. We got the speed, the platforming, the multiple routes, everything you could want out of a 2D Sonic game. And then you get to Zone 2. And all the magic is gone. We now gotta go through slower levels and edge slowly closer toward the end. Personally, I don't mind a bit of slower paced gameplay. This game is a platformer after all, and there's bound to be at least some less paced areas. But the first game really does overuse the amount of waiting you have to do. And then there's Labyrinth Zone. Other than that though, this game is still pretty damn great. It's a solid first game for a series to have and still holds up pretty well today. but the fact that Green Hill is the only really high quality level of that magnitude dampens it a bit. So B, might be too harsh, but it'll stay here for now. It might come as a shock to a lot of you that Lost World is this high up the tier list. It's an out of place game that doesn't seem to belong in the series and is forgotten about pretty easily by a lot of fans. Well, the thing is, this game is pretty good in selective parts where it counts. Before we even begin the first level, you can see the immense amount of vibrant colour piercing through the screen. Visually, Lost World is bright, loud and eye-catching, all good qualities to have in a game. Haven't I seen this somewhere before? The controls are also very polished and don't feel too stiff and are very fluid, except on the PC port. And then of course they implemented a run button for some reason. No, I swear I'm getting deja vu. But along with this, the zones are laid out in explorable map form, with each zone being, a biome. This is a Mario game. This was the primary downfall of Lost World. Not the plot, which was pretty weak and unexplained, this. There is such a major identity crisis going on in this game because so much has been ripped from the bloated plumber. Wall jumping, sprinting, slow side-scrolling, the villains, the level design. There's a reason I nickname it Sonic Galaxy. And then of course there's the story. Underbaked, as most of the 2010 plots were. On a basic level, Lost World is fun. Just for all the wrong reasons. Its controls are polished, it has the widest variety of unique animations I've seen in any canon game like this, it's fun. But Jesus Christ, it really didn't have to copy Nintendo's homework this much to appeal to Wii U users. It just made him lose what makes him unique in the first place. We love a bit of variety, but we also love originality. Don't forget that. And lastly, we have the singular most underrated game in the series. I will repeat this for as long as I live, Colors is unfairly overhated. From what I've heard from friends, other names in the scene and my own personal experience, everybody unanimously hates on Colors simply because the modern games took so much from it. The wisps have been reused indefinitely, it seems like, the final boss too, and the story is referred to as the most basic it can get. So let me give my say on why all of you are being fucking douchebags. That's a joke. Kinda. Starting off with a hot take. Colors has the best atmospheres of any game in the entire series. Dead serious. There's really only one game I can think of in the series that comes close, but we'll get there eventually. The theme of space is ever present in Colors, and there is an absolutely mesmerising and electric feel to all the areas, especially Starlight Carnival, Asteroid Coaster and Planet Wisp. Through the lighting, space feels as if it's staring down at you like the Majora's Mask moon, and that paired with the music and levels, it's phenomenal and unmatched. Also, Wisp gameplay is actually good. Unlike modern games where Wisps are overutilized in needless situations, here, look at them, they actually make a difference. The Drill Wisp allows you to create alternate pathways to completely new areas, discovering treasures beneath the surface, which is almost always optional and not necessary to progress forward, unlike Lost World's Wisps, which were required to move on to the next part of the stage. And then there's Frenzy, very unique and was an enjoyable short burst. Only downside was that whenever it was presented, you are forced to use it to move on. And the plot, yeah, okay, it is simple, but it still has some soul in it, which is surprising seeing as Ken Penders wrote it. We're rescuing aliens from practically a slave factory, got its genesis in some interesting and dark territory, and the final boss is pretty good. But then we do have the negatives, most commonly the clear overuse of 2D segments, which appear once every 10 seconds after a 3D section started. Once again, I don't have a problem with this. I like 3D and 2D, so I don't mind constantly flipping between the two with a bit more oomph with the 2D sections, but some sections do make you stop entirely. The plot isn't as in-depth or character-driven by its older brother, it's more dumbed down with less than average writing. And the controller, if you had a nunchuck or extra add-on other than a Wiimote, it's fine, but just Wiimote alone, it's odd. And the voice direction was a little bit off in this game, which would get better as the series went on, but I guess that's going fucking nowhere now. It's going into B, as it's an aesthetically fantastic game with good mechanics that was unfortunately weighed down by the simplistic plot and baby-proof writing. Just give Colors another try. It's just a good and fun experience that really does deserve its own second chance. So let's just go ahead and move forces down a tip. We're nearly at the end now, and then I'll be forced to fend off the whole internet, and we've reached A. This is more of a reserved place for games that aren't quite as good as S, but these games still, they're nothing to scoff at. You'd have a hard time not enjoying these titles. But I'll be giving reasons why they're here and not in S as well. Generations. Is it a good game? Yes, absolutely, undoubtedly. Is it the absolute best though? General consensus agrees that Gens was the last good 3D game. Pros include, but aren't limited to, gorgeous graphics, smooth controls, great level design, terrific music, actually good 2D, redesigns of classic favourites, being an actual fun game that you can easily lose hours of time in. What's more, the modding community is ripe around this title on PC, offering many variations to the base game. You can't not enjoy yourself while playing this gem. However, this game is amazing. Okay, I really do enjoy it, but nothing is without sin, and the most common and most detrimental part of this game is the story, which is, dare I say, even more basic than Lost Worlds in colours. There is practically no narrative, so the final scene where everyone is cheering you on as if it were a SoCal tourney, it's more laughable than it is inspiring. Jesus Lord, come to think of it, the writing in the whole 2010 era was just so shit. Along with this, the game is sorta short, but that's subjective and varies from player to player, so perhaps not. At the end of the day for me, it really boils down to, does the gameplay make the non-existent story worth it? Well, we're here, so evidently not 100%. Okay. In a game built around 3D, the 2D sections, while still at a high standard, don't quite compare to the 2D mechanics there were back in the classics. But to be honest, those are very hard to beat, so not much can surpass them. Not much. So Gens, it gets a damn high A. It probably does deserve an S, but I really do wish they celebrated the characters a bit more alongside the worlds in the plot. But I would still give this game a hard recommend to anyone, fan or not. It's a damn solid game. Just the 2D, man, it's hard to pull off. And, speaking of 2D, the last two games in the original trilogy, and Knuckles. Classic Trilogy is an all-around solid batch of games to play in general, but where one failed in areas, 2, 3 and Knuckles fixed tenfold. For example, in 2 you can do the spin dash, you got Tails by your side, new zones where you can go fast again, everything that we wanted from the first game in a bit better quality. And Tails, lumping his stupid fucking ass around and making you lose all your damn ring. Then 3 and SNK released, and they cracked it down even further. A more interesting intro, Knuckles, the levels, and Knuckles, and one of the singular best special stages in the whole series, bar none. These games are revolutionary, and a bold pick for anyone that loves old school 2D platformers. I'll explain in a bit why they're in A, okay? Just chill. And now the last game in A tier, save my soul, Adventure. Okay, I think I've pissed off a good majority of fans here, I'm aware, but don't get me wrong, Adventure is good, but it can be ever so slightly better. It really goes without saying that the Adventure era was a fantastic time to be a Sonic fan. This game holds up 23 years later and will forever be a bold first step into 3D. Alright, back down you go. We don't talk about you. For starters, we've got open hub worlds that you can explore with NPCs, pathways, secrets, open air, traffic, everything. Along with this, the controls are pretty damn good for being an early 3D game, with maneuvering the characters feeling responsive, satisfying, and all the more rewarding once you master it. It's a game that could potentially rival Super Mario 64, arguably the most groundbreaking game of all time. But that's a discussion, or rather controversy, for another time. Speaking of the characters, there are no shortage here. Right off the bat we got a choice of 6 separate stories to dive into, and once all of them have been completed, the true ending unlocks with Supersonic and Perfect Chaos thrown into the fray. The game tells a compelling story detailing the Emeralds and their history, giving exposition on what Chaos is and how he's a thing because of them, all leading up to this final fight. Adventure is great. Okay, listen, during my first playthrough I struggled at some parts with knowing where to go, even Tikal's tips weren't to much avail, as some of the tips are so vague. Big is also another common criticism raised, and while I do think that it's fine once you get the hang of it, getting the hang of it in the first place took a while, as the game never actually told me what inputs to use to catch Froggy. I had to look up a guide to tell me to press the down input to latch him on, and it is pretty funny that you have to go through this trial and error if you want to get the true ending. Also, some voice deliveries were weak in areas. The direction isn't quite on par. Adventure is good, it's good, but it has flaws, like everything. So please, let me live for a few more days. We should probably move on to S. So now, we've reached the final frontier, S. This last zone encompasses the last 3 games that I am yet to talk about, which are all, in my opinion, the best of their respective areas. Even though all of the games in A are absolutely brilliant and none of them are bad, these have an edge, as it were, for being downright phenomenal. So to start off, we have the fantastic Sonic Adventure 2. Now let me explain why SA2 ranks higher than 1, because I'm going to end up on a railroad spike if I don't. To me, Adventure 2 feels as if it takes the original game and just polished it up in a glorious way. The levels feel more authentic, the cutscenes and voice deliveries are much better, the story flows at a better pace, and the world feels more connected. One thing that I absolutely love about Adventure 2 is the way that levels are laid out in their order, where you seemingly switch between the 3 characters in the selected story as the plot progresses, making for a great and varied ride. After Sonic meets Shadow and gets holy shit. The game shifts to Knuckles beginning, and again for Tails, all culminating to the point where the trio reunite. It doesn't feel as stop and start as parts of SA1 do, it's fluid, entertaining, and it's just good business. Then we got the Dark Path, giving even more backstory and lore to these characters, in particular Shadow, who is an actual character with goals for once. And among both these stories, 3 unique gameplay styles, all with very different approaches: speed, hunt, and mech stages. Speed is, well, speed. Hunt, you gotta find 3 pieces of the emerald in an often very vertical stage that offers exploration, and mech, where you power on through a stage at a slower pace, leaving absolute destruction in your wake. This is just glorious, and I'm conflicted on whether or not I prefer SA1 or SA2's Emerald Hunt stages, but regardless, both iterations, they're both really fun. Each one of these 3 styles feels more fleshed out than, say, Big's fishing, and while I don't have too much of a problem with Big's gameplay in SA1, it feels pretty shallow in comparison and as if it was just thrown in just because. But then we've got the final ending, 2 boss fights that bring the whole story home with a killer conclusion. It's just a shame that all this came at the cost of the hub worlds. I really did like them in SA1, but they're not here for the sequel, which does suck. But then again, it is probably the reason why the plot flows a bit better, so I can only just let it slip. Other than that though, this game earns its place in S for being really good in a lot of areas, and having that dark undertone of what happened on the Ark in a kid's game, that just adds something to the title that no other game has. Now, my second pick is argued to be one of the most overrated games in the series, but I'm going to ask those who think that a question. Do you want to know why it's regarded so highly? It's because it's a damn fucking good game. Sonic Mania. I cannot express how much I adore this game. Mania takes everything great about the classic 2D platformers and magnifies it tenfold in a nostalgic, authentic gem of a game. I mentioned earlier about explaining why the second half of the OG trilogy was an A, and Mania is the reason. Both of these classics are fantastic, but Mania purposefully picks and chooses what and what not to take from these older games, resulting in one of the best 2D platformers I have ever played. The zones are fast-paced, constantly shifting environments, throwing new things at you with every passing second. One minute you're here, the next you're there. The zones are beautifully detailed despite being in 2-dimensional proportions, with old favourites, redesigns, and brand new zones swinging into the fray. And Act 2 to a lot of these areas include a mechanic unique to that area. Chemical Plant, we got these liquids in vials. Oil Ocean, we got these chains to keep the smoke from fogging up the screen. Metallic Madness. Chibi Sonic. Want more from Mania? Sure thing. We got Mean Bean Machine, the Casino Item Area, UFO Emerald stages, which are magnificent, and they return the best minigame in the whole series, Blue Spheres. They've got a distinguished art style that is so perfect for this version of Classic that I wonder how I coped without it. The animations and textures are so detailed that you could stare at them for hours on end. And the music. Oh my god, the music. Certain pieces honestly feel entrancing with all the energy and nostalgia they're fueled with. It's actually insane. This game has the best standalone songs in the series. Hell, maybe even beyond the series, gaming as a whole. Mania is just the definitive 2D gaming experience with everything you want from a 2D Sonic game and more. And yes, I know, a lot of stages are places we've been before, but even if that's the case, you can't not enjoy yourself going through these stages, and Act 2 always has something to deviate itself from Act 1. If you know someone who says that Sonic is trash, give them a copy of this game, alright? Give them a copy of Mania, and then ask them again, I urge you. Yes, Oberon, I'm talking to you. Buy this game. And now we reach the last title on this list. The still commonly debated but undeniably soulful Sonic Unleashed. Unleashed is not so much a game as it is and adventure. For the first time in the series, I actually felt properly connected to this massive, unified world with believable NPCs. Yes, I've bashed this game in the past, but that was for the Wii port. The Xbox and PS3 versions are completely different. We venture across different lands with culture, life, reflections in an appropriately atmospheric game. I stand by the point that Colours is the best, but Unleashed takes a very close second. The gameplay is also really good, with the boost, the fantastic level design and freedom presented in the modern stages, not to mention the best little details to make the world feel even more persistent. The night stages are more controversial with the Hedgehog slowing the game down into a brawler, but like I've said earlier, I don't mind slowing down, taking my time and enjoying myself in this enthralling world. And a lot of these stages are only slow if you choose to make them slow. There's always more risky strats to take, more swift maneuvers you can do. And the story? We have stakes, we have a stellar cast of characters, a vibrant world with dense atmospheres, everything I could ever wish for. You root for Sonic, you see his personality and motifs, the relationship with Chip gradually grow, the final fight that feels earned, and like always, the soundtrack delivers once again, with one of the best OSTs in any game I've ever played. Mania may have the best standalone scores, but the upbeat and energetic music and gameplay and at times heart-wrenching songs and cutscenes, paired with the world it comes from, it's unrivaled. Unleashed is the best demonstration that Sega and Sonic Team can make a story-focused game work. I just wish that we could see more of this immersive and beautiful world that Sega briefly made, as it's the closest thing we've gotten to a masterpiece. So let's move forces down another tier. Thank you for listening to my bullshit. If you agreed, please subscribe and help me defend myself from the hordes of 06 Black Knight and SA1 stands that will come in droves and knock me off the face of the planet for not enjoying the games and having my own personal and subjective opinions. Please. Also, I got a Twitter. I occasionally make stuff. This stuff, art stuff, I think. Thank you for your patience on my non-existent upload schedule, and thanks for 500 subs. About a month or two late, my timing is impeccable.